Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our March 1st Tuesday event. I first want to say thank you to our audience. Whether you are returning or joining us for the first time, we are so glad to continue to be able to bring together our alumni and our friends throughout the world. Thank you as well to Wells Fargo, our long-standing corporate sponsor for First Tuesday, and to Twin Cities Business for your continued media support of the speaker series. Today, we're joined by our featured speaker, Corie Barry, CEO of Best Buy Inc. And I'll be asking Corie a few questions about leading through the pandemic, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the role of women in business before taking questions from all of you. This week also marks the beginning of Women's History Month, and Corie is part of one of the most selective groups of women in business, that of female CEOs who make up only 37 of the Fortune 500. So we'll hear from her about the role of women in the workplace as well. So let me start by telling you a bit about Corie's career with Best Buy. Corie joined Best Buy in 1999 and has held a variety of financial and operational roles across the organization, including Chief Strategic Growth Officer and Chief Financial Officer, before becoming CEO in June of 2019. And prior to becoming CEO, Corie played a critical role in developing and executing the company's Building the New Blue growth strategy and the related transformation that it created. So under Corie's leadership, Best Buy is driving towards becoming one of the very best places to work in America, doubling significant customer relationship events and growing annual revenue from 44 to 50 billion by 2025. The best thing is Corie is a Minnesota native and she holds a bachelor's degree in accounting and management from the College of St. Benedict, where she now serves on the board of trustees. Corie also previously served on the Carlson School's board of advisors and is now a member of our emeritus board. Corie, thank you so much for joining us today. Perhaps you can say a few words before we move on to questions.
Well, Shri, thank you so much for the invitation. This is just an honor to be able to tell a little bit of the Best Buy story. And I'm so appreciative that you're willing to take the time, and to your point that the audience is willing to take the time. So I look forward to a wonderful chat.
Thanks, Corie. I think we'll start off with what it took to lead Best Buy through the pandemic. None of us entered 2020 with any kind of playbook for how to navigate a pandemic. So how did you approach making decisions? With so much uncertainty.
So much uncertainty. There were, as I look back, you're never that organized in the moment, but as I look back, there were really three things that I think helped in decision-making. The first is we set very clear guiding principles very early in the pandemic. And they were, one, to protect the safety of our customers and employees. That was the most important. The second was to protect the employee experience as long as possible, as much as possible. And the third was to come out the other side of this, not just a vital company, but a vibrant one. And those three priorities have steered every decision that we've made through the pandemic. And frankly, they continue to steer our decisions as we're still in it today. The second major thing that I learned is use the people around you. There's not one decision that I've made sitting by myself in my office, although I'm by myself in my office a lot, but you use those people around you, especially in a world that has never had a course charted for it. And so leveraging the board expertise, leveraging other CEOs, leveraging prior CEOs here at Best Buy, leveraging industry experts, more than any other time in my career, really making sure you don't do this alone, that you do it with others, was incredibly important. And the third really important way in which we navigated this was creating feedback loops. We needed to hear quickly from our frontline associates, whether that was in supply chain centers, whether that was Geek Squad agents, whether that was retail associates. We needed to hear what was working, what wasn't working, and what we needed to pivot on really rapidly. And I think we created more feedback loops quickly than we ever had in our history. So we could respond in a bit of a more agile way because we didn't know what the next day would bring in terms of challenges. And I think as we combined those things together, we at least had the bumpers in place to try to guide our decision making.
That's really interesting because I know in March, retailers were either described as essential or non-essential, and essential folks were allowed to come back in person. And Best Buy was unique that you were deemed essential, but you still chose to close your in-person physical stores. What led to that decision?
Yeah, so we have to put ourselves back in time here, but it's really funny. I was actually looking through, I have a COVID folder in my Outlook because I'm a maniacal folder keeper. And I thought this was going to be a really temporary folder. And it's now the most full folder I have, of course. And the first email that we sent to our employee base was on February 29th, and it was regarding international travel. And I was thinking back how it felt then. And we have to remember, safety was our first priority. We said that out loud, and we were determined to make decisions that represented that. Second, at that point, nobody was sure what was safe. We didn't know if masks were helpful or not. We didn't understand just how important social distancing was. We weren't sure exactly how the virus was transmitted. And so you had this real fear that was building in our customer and employee base around genuinely life or death decisions. And so we needed to figure out empirically how we could make the shopping experience safe. Then there was the question of, is there value in what we do? We felt strongly there was value in what we were doing. I mean, every one of us went home and started working on the back of technology overnight. So we really felt like, no, we have a right to continue to get customers our products. But we could not look ourselves in the eye when our employees were really, really nervous about going to work. And so we said, do we actually have the infrastructure in place that might allow us to provide this value to our customers, but do it in a way that really genuinely prioritizes customer and employee safety? And that is when we decided to make the move to curbside. We flipped all approximately 1,000 of our stores to curbside in a matter of 48 hours. And amazingly, in even just the first couple weeks after, we were already retaining 70% of our sales. And that slowly started to increase from there. And so it just allowed us this chance to say, no, we really are going to prioritize safety, but we're also going to leverage years of investments in our infrastructure in a way that will still get people the gear they need.
That's fascinating. I mean, it's really that you stuck with your principles and you elucidated them. You talked about safety, you talked about the employee experience, and the value added. So I think that just this managing with principles is such an important lesson there. What are some of the other lessons that you learned in the past year? You said you're getting these feedback loops, etc. What are they telling you, and what do you think? What's related to the pandemic? What will stick with you as you move forward?
Yeah, as I think about this period of time, there were really, for me, four really large lessons. And then I'll hit on what I think are some of the lasting implications. The first I already talked about, which is this is not a job you do alone. And it's interesting. I think most people look at the CEO role or a role like yours, Shri, and they just assume you're just handing out decisions every day. The truth is you have an amazing management team around you. You have an amazing board to support you. You are much better suited using the expertise of others to make the best possible decisions. And this period of time has underscored that for me more than any other period of time in certainly my work history. The second important thing that I learned is that in a period of crisis, it is all the more important that you are very clear about what's important. I love how you said it, Tree, this idea of, using your principles to prioritize. Clarity of communication, clarity of what's important is more important now than it's ever been. And we over communicated to continue to try to just provide people context and clarity throughout the pandemic. The third is making sure you take the time to lift your head up outside of your own organization and look outside. When you're dealing with something like a pandemic, something that's never been faced before, you are well served to try to listen to other experts. We spent time with epidemiologists, which you know well at the University of Minnesota. We spent time with doctors. We spent time with economists, really trying to educate ourselves on what we thought the implications were of the environment we were working in, and therefore making decisions that were based in real, true empirical fact as much as possible. And then finally, more than ever, this has been a period of time where as a CEO, I have to get comfortable being vulnerable and getting personal with people. this is not just something that's impacting our work lives. You all know it out there. This is personal. This is impacting people's everyday personal life. You've got parents with kids. We were talking about that earlier. You've got aging, maybe parents like in my life. I have a grandma who's 101. You've got implications across the board in people's personal lives. And I, as CEO and the management team, felt it was really important that we actually embraced that and created safe spaces where you could be personal with people.
No, that's, I think, great lessons, especially reaching out to others, others who are, also going through the same thing with you. And I know just before we started this, I was chatting with you a little bit about what you see as we come through the pandemic, what kind of hybrid work situations would we face, especially with so many of the technology leaders like Salesforce, et cetera, saying we're never going to come back to the office. So what do you think about that? Who have you reached out to? What's the, what are you seeing there?
I think return to work will be one of the most interesting challenges. Now, it's also a massive opportunity because I think we've all proven to ourselves we can work in hybrid ways we never thought possible. But in the CEO roundtables that I have the luxury of being a part of, one of the most talked about topics is how you balance the important cultural and the important, more organic conversations that happen when you physically have people in a location, how you balance that with a real ability to embrace flexibility and more remote working environments over time. And so every one of us is trying to figure out, how do I specify based on role, based on the rhythms of your role, based on the types of decisions that you're trying to make? How do I try to find that balance between the real goodness that you have when you have teams of people working together with a whiteboard in a room? How do I balance that with, parents who really see a strong benefit being that they can be more flexible in their lives, or someone who would like to work remotely and is willing to be very loyal to your company, but wants to live in Texas because that's where their family is. I think more and more you will develop unique situations very tailored to employees based on their life experience and the unique qualities that they bring to your company. But I see, no matter what, a world that's more flexible on the other side of this.
That's very good lessons there. I'm going to ask you a slight, I'm a strategy professor, so I like to ask strategy questions, right?
Yes.
So, where do you see retail generally in the next 3 to 5 years post-pandemic, especially given this, the behemoth that we know exists on the West Coast? I mean, we're all trying to figure out, how we live without, or can we live without Amazon is the question, right?
Yeah, I mean, the future of retail, there are three hypotheses we actually had. We had an investor update about 18 months ago, and at an investor update, most of you know, you just provide strategically where you think the business is going. And there were three hypotheses we had then that have been massively underscored by the pandemic. The first is that digital penetration was only going to grow over time. Now, what happened that was interesting is what we thought might take 5 or 7 years to happen literally happened overnight. I mean, in our case, our online penetration was 19% 2 years ago. Last year, 43% of our business was done online. Now, 2/3 of that was picked up in our stores. So it's an interesting combination of assets for us. And that, I think, is an important ongoing implication. We believe the customer has changed forever. They've changed in a way that is much more digital first. And our strategy is to embrace that and use the suite of assets we have in order to lead in that space and lean into it. The second major implication is a little bit of what we were just talking about, Shri. Flexibility of employee workforces will be only more important going forward. And for us, that's not just about our corporate workforces and how they work remotely or here. For us, that's also about our retail workforces and how are they able to cross-train and upskill so they can move seamlessly from maybe working curbside experiences for 4 hours into working the sales floor for 3 hours, into manning the callback queue and answering customer questions by a phone if they're not busy enough on the floor. this idea of flexibility and then the digital tools that will underpin that flexibility is really, we think, another lasting implication. And finally, certainly for us, we believe that the last implication really relates to our purpose. We believe our purpose is to enrich lives through technology. And everybody's life has been lived really, truly on the back of technology, whether it's what we're doing here today, whether it's learning from home, entertaining, gaming, cooking, outside entertainment, all of these things have been enabled in unique ways by technology. And we feel our purpose is even more relevant than it ever has been before, which again, for us, having had these hypotheses going in, it is actually really refreshing for us to feel like they're coming to life in a more accelerated way.
Oh, that's fantastic. That really is. I think with this, let me move to another topic that is, very close to all of us, and it's our diversity and inclusion efforts, especially given, the conversations we've been having with organizations since the death of George Floyd, which happened right in our hometown. So it's been particularly difficult for so many of us. And so, what are you doing at Best Buy to further racial equity?
Yeah, I'm going to start with, you could feel our community and certainly our teams, to your point, this being our backyard, literally crying out for change. And so at Best Buy, the first thing we did was admit that we needed to do better. And I actually sent out a letter personally to our entire customer base and said, we as a company believe we need to do better. And there are really three vectors that we have been working on and that we've really tried to double down on in the time since the death of George Floyd. And then we think about it as our company, our community, and our country, because the size and scale of our organization, we have a really large reach of influence. And so we immediately set up a task force for racial equality that is made up of and comprised of individuals across the organization, different levels, different backgrounds throughout the organization. And the first step was to really sponsor a very free and open exchange of feelings, opinions, ideas, and frankly, recommendations for us. And from that, we have made a number of commitments. And I want to say out loud, this isn't just going to be about one commitment a large company makes. I think this is all about resilience, and this is about an ongoing, perpetual commitment to continue to drive change. And so we have done things like we set out some very specific hiring goals. We said that 1 out of 3 non-hourly corporate positions would be filled with someone that is Black, Indigenous, or Latinx. And we said that out loud. We also said that 1 out of 3 non-hourly field roles would also be filled by women. We're trying to be very specific about where we lag and where we haven't made enough progress. We are also fostering retention rate parity amongst all of those groups. And we believe our senior leadership ranks need to reflect actually our board, which is very diverse. We have over 50% women, and we have about a third that are people of color. On the work on the social impact side of things and the community side of things in the country, we doubled down on our teen tech centers. Those are centers that are often put in disadvantaged communities that are staffed with all of the latest and greatest tech, and people who can help after school, students from about middle school up, come in and learn things like coding, but also music mixing and graphic design. And these are becoming really excellent pipelines into higher education. And to pair with those, we have set up a number, about $44 million worth of scholarships that will expand college prep and career opportunities. Because what would be amazing? What would be amazing is you have a network of teen tech centers that grab kids early, and we can get them interested in STEM because they have access. Then you provide scholarship opportunities to schools like the U of M or like some of the other HBCU schools, and then you bring them back into these amazing companies here in Minnesota. And this pipeline, we know from experience, is very powerful and leverages our communities. And then, I mean, there are many other things that we could talk about because, like I said, this is an effort on all fronts. But I think what we're trying to do is really put ourselves out there, make continuous commitments, update on our progress, and continue to move this work forward.
No, I think this is great. I mean, we are beneficiaries of your your generosity with the teen tech, particularly with students from the teen tech centers. And we hope we can attract some of them to the Carlson School and to the University of Minnesota. We're always kind of working on building our own pipeline as well. So thank you for that. And thank you for providing leadership in that area, even way before all the events that happened last year. So this is just, it's a joy to hear about that. I think this brings me again to this basic idea of purpose, which you talked about briefly about, and, this idea of leading of purpose. What has that meant to you? What does it mean to Best Buy? I mean, how do you look at it?
I think about it on almost three different vectors around purpose. The first is the purpose of the company. Our purpose is not to make money. That is an imperative. It is something that is required. And my predecessor used to talk about this a lot, and I am a full believer in the idea that purpose needs to be something bigger. It needs to be your reason you exist on the planet. And the reason this company exists on the planet is to enrich lives through technology. Now, that's powerful because it's not just about the business that we're bringing to bear. Even when we talk about the inclusion and diversity efforts, they very much tie into our purpose as a company. We're here to provide technology to enrich lives. That's not just paying people's lives. That is, how do you use technology to enrich lives across the board? And so I think there's this connection then to our social purpose. What is it that now as a company, I think it is more important than ever that we use our scale and our influence to drive social change from here. So there's the company's purpose, there is this kind of social purpose, and then there is each of our individual purpose. And I think that the real magic happens when you connect those three things in particular. My purpose, as an example, I believe I am here to be an excellent steward. My job is to leave this place, my community, my family better than when I found them. And therefore, I can tie that directly into the company's purpose. And when I feel that what I'm here to do is very much attached to what we're here to do as an organization, it makes me want to move mountains. It makes me want to do amazing things to try to set us up for the future. And they can be hard decisions for today, but you really fundamentally have to believe you're building the best possible company for the future. I mean, I like to say, I'd love to make this a place that my kids aspire to work at.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think you've hit upon something very, very, very important. I hope we can promote this more widely. I mean, this idea that that as individuals we have a purpose as well, and if that can tie into our organization's purpose, that's the magic. I mean, that's when it isn't a job anymore, it's a calling. It changes the way you approach your work, and I'm very, very inspired by that.
I love that. I love not a job, it's a calling. I'm going to freely leverage that from you, because I think that is exactly on our best days. Every one of us, I think, would say on our best days, that's how we feel.
That's right. That's right. Not every day is a best day, but still, yeah.
We have to be honest about that.
That's right. But, again, I think as we try and educate our students for a future in business, future where technology is going to be so critical, what do you think we should be developing them for? What are some of the most important skills? What are the lessons you'd like our students to have as they come and work for you?
This is so interesting because you can always go the tactical route on this one. There are skills that are helpful, but that's not actually what I think about when I think about our most engaged and most successful employees. A little bit of a story here. Robert Stevens started the Geek Squad. He actually was a University of Minnesota student and ended up realizing that a lot of the people around him needed help with their computing, mainly at that point, equipment. And he started just a small business on the side to repair and help people make their computing equipment work. And as it turned out, there was a lot of demand for that. And so he stepped away from the U of M and built the Geek Squad, which we ultimately acquired for multi-million dollars. I always was fascinated by, because he had such a strong point of view about what makes a Geek Squad agent unique and how much they care about the customer. And so one day I sat with him, and I love to pick his brain. He was like one of those just amazing, smart people that you want to listen to. And I said, what is it that you hire for? What do you look for? And he said, I look for three things: curiosity, drive, and ethics. Because if an employee has those things, they will go to the ends of the earth to look for and learn about what the right and best way may be to do it. And I can trust that they will do it in an ethical manner. And it is, I mean, we probably had that conversation 15 years ago, and it has stuck with me, because genuinely those employees that I see, those people I surround myself that seem to love their job and their life the most, they tend to exhibit those things: curiosity, drive, and ethics. And so I think, yes, learn the skills. Yes, differentiate yourself based on the classes you take and the knowledge you have. But I think at the end of the day, you will be differentiated more probably by kind of like the EQ side of who you are than even the IQ side.
Curiosity, drive, and ethics. Okay, I shall get that message out to our students. I mean, I'm just happy to say that most of the students I come across are curious and driven, and very, very, and full of integrity. So I'm just, I just hope that we can continue to, provide the kind of talent that firms like Best Buy and this community need and
Absolutely.
want.
Yeah.
And and just sort of highlighting that, I mean, maybe we talked about sort of the students at the entry level. Do you feel that curiosity, drive, and ethics are still the most important qualities that at the managerial level, or as they go up the leadership ladder, are you looking for different things at that point?
Yeah, we actually have developed what I think is a little bit of a unique lens on what it looks like to lead today. And it's based in what we call our inclusive leadership behaviors. So well before the pandemic, we sat down and said, what creates a culture of belonging? Sri, you and I have talked about this a little bit before. Maslow's hierarchy. Most of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, which was basically what are the needs that you need to fulfill in order to be a happy and well-adjusted human. And the base of Maslow's hierarchy was always thought to be things like food and water and like literally basic needs to function as a human. And some of the most recent teaching has evolved to say, no, the base of the pyramid is actually belonging. It is a feeling of genuinely belonging. And so at Best Buy, we tried to dissect, what does it look like? What does it feel like when you feel like you genuinely belong at an organization? And there were 4 inclusive leadership behaviors that we determined. Hold please. Vulnerability, empathy, grace, and courage. And when those come together in the right mix, you tend to create this environment of belonging. And interestingly, as we've gone through the pandemic, there are no 4 behaviors that we have leaned on more: vulnerability, courage, empathy, and grace. And we even now, as we would talk to our board about our leaders and how they lead, we actually talk about it in the frame of how they exhibit those behaviors. And I don't know that you hear companies talk about that as kind of the leadership and values backbone. But I will tell you, from a management perspective, especially when you're going through a time like we are right now, continuously exhibiting those behaviors and even having the grace to forgive yourself is incredibly important. And so I think as our careers go on and as the world continues to evolve, I think we're just seeing new and different ways to think about leadership and what's important in leaders.
That's again great lessons. I mean, vulnerability and empathy and grace and courage, and as you very rightly mentioned, at this time, particularly during the pandemic, these qualities have been so critical, and being able to keep employees engaged and motivated, and for leaders themselves to sort of be able to have that grace with themselves as well. I think that's really interesting.
I think that's harder than almost any other part of it, Sri, is this idea of having grace for ourselves. Every one of us, whether we say it out loud or not, is carrying a lot. And so giving yourself that moment to say, I'm doing my best today. To your point, this might not be one of my best days, but I'm doing my best today. And having that conversation openly, I think it's freeing for our employees.
That's absolutely right. Let's get to, this is Women's History Month, and let's get to sort of a discussion of women in the workplace. I mean, I think one of the things that I have been very, very concerned about, particularly, seeing this firsthand in my role as chair of the Minneapolis Fed, 2020 has brought so many issues to highlight, particularly regarding women with work and home responsibilities. We've seen an amazing number of women drop out of the workforce. Women are occupying some of the lowest paid jobs in the service economy, and those jobs have gone faster than others. So it's been so. What do you think this time will say about the advancement of women? Ultimately, do you think this time will prove good for the advancement of women? Is it going to be detrimental to their career growth? I mean, will it set us back on so much of the advancement we've had thus far? So how do we address these challenges after the pandemic?
I'm concerned about it, Sri, like you. I worry, and it's based in data. The quantity of women that are leaving the workforce is unprecedented.
Mhm.
And no matter what, it is incredibly difficult, I believe, to pull that workforce back in, even on the other side of this. And so I worry. And I mean, I think most companies, and I know you as well, are trying to think through ways in which we can try to help this population in particular as much as possible. So, for us, we are looking at tutoring, we're looking at childcare reimbursement, we're looking at facilities for kids. Like, we've set up a program where you can bring your kids into the office if they need better Wi-Fi or better space. I think we're trying to think through what are all the creative things we can do right now. But into the future, I think we are all going to have to hold hands and think differently about trying to pull women back into the workforce who may have had to step aside for a little while, and get them back into our buildings and get them back into our companies. And it's part of the reason we've set, some of our own hiring goals, because I think we need to keep an eye on that ball as well, because I don't want us to take a step back as a result of this. And the flip side that could be really good is maybe we can redefine what work looks like on the other side of this. Maybe more working parents can feel comfortable because they have more flexibility, and they feel like they can dedicate themselves. So my hope is that you actually can offer maybe a different working environment and culture on the other side that will pull people back in. But the data would just say, the most recent McKinsey Lean In study said, we're losing record numbers of women from the workforce. We're particularly losing them from higher level director and above kind of jobs within the workforce, those places where people are really making those big career advancement moves. And we are particularly losing women of color from the workforce as well. And that's hard because all those are the places where we've been trying to make the most progress.
Right. Yeah, I fully agree with you there. I mean, it's an interesting idea that maybe the flexibility will help, and maybe we can rethink how we allow women to work maybe more from home, etc. But at the same time, there's this whole issue of, how do we get them back? And that's, especially with the rate at which technology is advancing, skill sets get obsolete very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that that women can re-enter, that, what kind of onboarding can we provide them? Again, we are very interested in all of that. So anything we can do to help out the firms as well, and how we help onboard women who left the workforce, either temporarily or for a long time, I think that would be very, very interesting to us.
And Sri, I think you hit on something really important. It definitely applies to women. It actually is going to apply much more broadly. And that is this idea of reskilling the workforce of today for tomorrow. There are so many lasting implications of the pandemic. Retail is just one example. They're across industries. And I think most companies are trying to think through, how could I reskill some of my existing workforce so I maybe can divest in areas that are no longer as relevant to invest in areas like analytics or, like digital, that really I know I'm going to need from here. And I think you hit on a great point there, which is, can we disproportionately focus on doing that for women as we try to think about how we bring them back into the workforce?
Right, right. And, in that context, you're only one of 37 women CEOs in the Fortune 500, but your board is more than half female, which is fantastic. So how have you navigated this? What's the value for you personally and for Best Buy in having a board that is more than 50% women?
Diversity is good for business. I don't know how many studies have proven this time and again. More diverse boards, more diverse leadership teams tend to drive better financial outcomes over time. And I fundamentally believe it, and I read everything I can that reinforces it. And so when you go in with the predisposition that diversity is good for business, then you need to start at the highest level. And for us, that's been the board. What's a luxury, it feels like for me with the board, is that they're actually typically going to push me harder on some of the issues around inclusion and diversity than I might push myself. They all come from different backgrounds. Like I said before, it is more than 50% female. It is about a third people of color. And so when I have to have conversations that can be, they can be divisive, they can be seen as more related to social justice than business, it is an absolute luxury to have that diversity of board experience and life experience that can help you navigate. And it's true even in the very first question you asked me, Shri, how do you navigate a situation that has no playbook? Well, you have the best chance of navigating it well when you're taking into account many different life experiences, many different work experiences, and using their expertise to try to shape the path going forward. If there's one thing I'm an advocate for whenever I have a chance to talk to other leaders, it is push yourself to create the most diverse board possible, because they ultimately will help you become a better leader.
This is fantastic. I mean, again, just the ability to listen to different voices on the board, and it's just and I love that you're always referring to reaching out to others for help and advice, and that it's a luxury to be able to get this kind of input from so many different people. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think at this point where we should turn it over to our audience. I'm sure there are some questions from the audience and comments, and Amy will help us. I know there's some questions already posted. And so Amy, do you want to sort of look at the Q&A and read it out to our audience? And
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we've got lots of questions. Thank you, Corie. There's been so many positive comments about a lot of the topics you're saying. So it's really resonating with our audience today. One of the first questions we have, I'm going to read this whole thing here. It says, it's so powerful to see two women in this important conversation. What about your experiences as a woman in business do you feel has made your experience as leaders, I guess this is for both of you, in your respective organizations that may be unique in comparison to men who have led your organizations? I feel like it's very important to demonstrate that it's, quote, not just a job, it's a calling, and making that a meaningful, making an impact in your community.
I'll start, and then Shri, I'd love some of your thoughts on this topic. That is a robust question. I don't know if it's about my experience as a woman being unique. Often a corollary question I get here is, how did you navigate the rooms where you might be the only woman in them? Or how did you decide that you wanted to work in an industry that was much more male dominated? And instead of feeling like I was out of place in those rooms, I actually decided, I guess, to turn my mindset and said, it actually is all the more reason they need me in these rooms. I am unique and my voice deserves to be heard, and I can bring a different point of view. And there is huge advantage in that for me. And so I don't know if it's different because I only have my own life experience, but I think certainly for me, turning my mindset to I am unique and there's great power in that. That was a big turning point for me, because it continued to give me the confidence that I have every right to be in that room with 25 investment bankers, explaining our strategy going forward. And I may not look or sound like the rest of them, but I think that's the coolest part about me being in that room. And so I guess I took my own personal confidence from being unique in the room.
That's so interesting, Corie. You asked about my experience. I think in my case, I think my parents just gave me a lot of self-esteem, and I have to be grateful to them for that. I mean, and so when I, came into a room, I was fairly gender blind. And and I almost had to be educated that sometimes your conversation's not being picked up, etc. I didn't see it, and I would, or maybe I ignored it, or maybe I interrupted when I shouldn't have, etc. I'm probably not the most empathetic person, so I jump in and interrupt, and that actually helped me, as in this whole situation. But I think this idea that you've laid out, that there is some value to uniqueness. I mean, I realize that sometimes people would remember me when they may not have remembered a male colleague just because I was the only woman in the room or the only woman at the table. They would have this, and that itself is a powerful, advantage. So that was, I'd probably leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. We have someone asking if you can describe Best Buy's culture in a nutshell.
I would describe it as proud. And what do I mean by that? We have an incredibly dedicated workforce of over 100,000 people who every day, I genuinely believe, are working to bring our purpose to life. And more often than not, I get the chance. One of the nice things about living in the pandemic is that I have the chance to do a lot more Zoom calls with our general managers or with assistant managers in the store. And it's something I prioritize every week. And I have a chance to Zoom in, and almost every time, the general manager will start with, I am just so proud. I'm proud of my employees. I'm proud of the way we're trying to lead through this. I'm proud of our ability to help customers. I think this idea of pride and working to really lead by example and make others proud, it is something that is incredibly prolific throughout this organization, and something that every day I am excited to have the chance to represent.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question is, as the pandemic is easing up, what are the company's plans to expand globally to the emerging markets via partnerships or mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, we actually have decided strategically that there is plenty of opportunity for us in North America, and that is where we are going to continue to remain focused. Consumer electronics is a very bifurcated industry across the world, and we had historically joint ventures in Europe, we had locations in China, we had locations in Turkey, and over time, we have actually shut down those businesses and returned our focus to just really being great here in Canada and the US. And strategically, we think we have plenty of opportunity there, and that is for right now where we continue to remain focused. No plans to move global yet, but I won't say never.
I think you're doing exactly the right thing there. I would have advised you the same way. I study international strategy all the time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's a hard decision. Trust me, it can look really tempting on the face of it.
Sure.
But for us, we get a lot more bang for our buck staying focused on what a business and a clientele that we know.
Right.
How could Best Buy go further in encouraging your suppliers to provide more products that embody sustainability and then promoting them or having minimum standards?
Yeah, we're actually doing quite a bit of work in this space. We always can go further. So the push is a very, very good one. But especially as you think about areas like appliances and energy usage and how we can help customers understand the trade-off decisions they're making depending on whatever appliance they're buying and how they could actually make much more effective and efficient decisions. So it's not just working with suppliers who we definitely are partnering with to try to come up with unique solutions, but it's also educating the customers so that when they're making a decision, it's a fully informed one, not just about the kind of speeds and feeds of any given product, but also about what is the impact to climate change of any given suite of products. So we both work upstream with our vendor partners to try to make those decisions upstream, but then also working downstream to try to just educate more fully. We also importantly have the largest consumer electronics recycling program in the country, and we're very proud of our ability to sustainably recycle CE products, which also can be over the long-term life of the products, some of the more damaging impacts. So we're trying both upstream to influence how the products are being made, but then also all the way downstream through recycling to make sure they are disposed of appropriately as well.
I see a question in the chat, which I think is very interesting, and it's about women again. And, it's Marilyn Nelson who says one problem today is that many women turn down promotions, worrying about family and perhaps lacking the confidence in themselves. What do you say to them? What can we say to them?
I think it's important to really examine why you might be nervous about that promotion. And I say this with a very open heart. When I thought about the role of CEO, I was very concerned about the potential implications on my family, on me. And one of the wisest things my predecessor ever asked me to do was to sit down and write on paper, what is it that's making you nervous about this? And then importantly, what would need to be true to give you more confidence? And this is where, Shri, my initial hypothesis. And so I was writing down these things and trying to fight my way through them. And as I'm walking through this list of things that is giving me anxiety about the job, my predecessor laughed. He has this big wholehearted laugh, and he said, "You act like you have to do this job all by yourself." And it was such an interesting mental turning point for me. And then I started to focus on, okay, what would I need to surround myself with in order to feel like I have the best chance of success in this role? And so I would encourage you, it's okay to be nervous about taking a bigger job. And nobody ever wants to say that out loud either. I think it's actually very wise to really think through what might give you pause about taking that job, because it gets you really clear on what would need to be true. And in my case, having only been CEO for less than a year when the pandemic hit, it was wonderful that I had already thought about the infrastructure I needed in place to make me feel like I could be successful. So I would say, don't just say no or assume what the other side is going to look like. Take the time to think about what's giving you pause, and then really think about what would be in place that might make you feel better and might make you feel like you have a best chance for success.
I think that's very wise advice. I mean, just as even as at any level, as women are taking on additional responsibilities, really trying to see how they can lean on, their support structures. How can they create some support structures to help them, whether it's with family, friends, whatever. But it's absolutely critical that we try and put these support networks in place, both in the workplace and outside,
Yeah.
to be able to do this. So that's great advice. Amy, are there other questions?
So many, Shri.
Oh, yeah.
In line with the question that you just answered, Corie, do you lead differently as CEO versus how you lead in other roles? Do you shape the CEO's role more, or does that role shape you?
I think with any role, you need to be clear about who you are as a leader and what's important to you. In my time, mostly at Best Buy, but in my work life history, the only time I've seen people not succeed is when they try to be something they think others want them to be. And there's like this internal friction that's created when, as a person, you are one thing, but as a leader, you keep trying to push yourself to be something else. And I think whenever there's dissonance between who you are as a person, what's important to you, your purpose, and who you are as a leader, it's going to burn you out. And so, yes, there are different expectations of me because I'm the CEO. And of course, you might craft a message differently as a CEO than you might as a CFO, as an example. But the core of what's important to me, the core of how I lead, the core of what I recognize and reinforce, that is more crucial to my purpose, kind of my being, the essence of who I am. And so I think it's really important that you're clear about leadership principles that are important to you, no matter what the role is. And then of course you might craft messages differently, or you might bring it to life a little bit differently depending on your area of responsibility.
Thank you. Could you please expand on Best Buy's work in health, empowering the health of individuals and families? What are some priorities, and how do you envision Best Buy's collaboration with other major players in the healthcare sectors? meaning payers, medical device firms, providers, and so on.
Yeah, this is a great example of bringing your purpose to life in a little bit of a different vector. So overarching purpose is to enrich lives through technology. We see a real distinct ability to do that in healthcare. And health is such a huge conversation. Like everybody's talking about health, but there's a lot of different vectors you can go in health. Our vector is around the role technology can play in helping everyone understand their health and actually take control of their health. And there's really three spaces where we are focused right now. The first is consumer health products. There has been a proliferation of health products. I always have multiple things on my wrists as I'm learning about my own personal health. Everything from, measuring my pulse ox to measuring my temperature. All of those things can be connected blood pressure cuffs, connected outlet socks for your babies, so you know if their blood oxygen levels are deterring. This area, I think, will continue to proliferate, and I think you're going to see much more expansion in consumer electronic products that are related to health. And our role, really, we commercialize new technology as well as anyone. And so we're very focused on helping to bring those connected health products to life. The second piece, though, is what we call active aging. And I mean, we have a rapidly aging population. 10,000 people are turning 65 every single day. And for the most part, they want to, based on every bit of information we have, live in their homes longer with the help of technology. And there are many different solutions that can be used. We acquired a small company called Great Call that actually makes devices, handheld devices, that have very quick access buttons to call centers that are tailored to help an aging consumer on the other side. And they help with everything from, can you help me order food, all the way to, no, I really am having a medical emergency and I need help. And we are building out the suite of products that will help people age in their homes. I mean, a real distinct example, my grandma is 101, and we just put one of the Google Nest products in her apartment so that we actually can look in on her occasionally during the day and just make sure we know, has she fallen? Is she doing okay? All with her consent, so not creepy. But this idea that as a caregiver, I can have an eye into my 101-year-old grandma, it's an incredibly powerful tool. And it's all on the back of technology. And then the third part is virtual care. That's more getting into the end of the question, which is around how do you find partners and payers and providers. That will look like these connected devices will stream data. That data will need to be algorithmically read, and then insights will be passed on to either the provider or maybe the caregiver, depending on who would like those insights more. That's the more nascent part of the business, but our hypothesis is it's the part of the business that grows the most over the next 5-year window. And so that is where we are working and already looking at partners. We announced a partnership with Microsoft to utilize some of their health-based cloud infrastructure. And there'll be many partners along the way on that one. But our differentiator, again, across all that is many people want to work in health. Very few want to deal with the technology. Is it connected? Does it work together? Is it staying working? And that, again, pivots right off our purpose, but opens up even bigger potential vectors for growth in the future.
Thank you so much. Cherie, we have one more that I think is a little bit different than we've asked before. How would you describe yourself as a mom?
Oh, wow. You're right. I have not gotten that one. I think I am a very caring and loving mom. And I think I'm a better mom because I work and have the job that I do. And it's taken me a long time to try to say that out loud. But I think I am a mom who loves her children deeply. They know I love them deeply. And I'm a better mom because I have the job that I have.
You know, Corie, I fully endorse that point of view. I think I'm a better mom because I've worked too. And I can see that now. I can see that. And, I have, my children are a lot older than yours. I have 4 grandsons now. And I can see that in the way our son, for instance, interacts with his wife and the support he provides her and how they work together as a team in raising their 2 kids. I mean, it's just and that's something that's happened, I think, mainly because he saw how I had to travel on work, and I was away in Japan and in China and things like that when the kids were very young. And so they were quite used to mom not being around, and so it was just so, and I see that, in this, in the positive impact it's had on the next generation. So I fully endorse. Let me tell you, you are a better mom because
And it's hard. I'm not going to pretend like, and this isn't a judgment call. This is just me. And I love how it's just about how you're wired. And if I could say anything, just embrace how you're wired and how you define what being a great mom looks like. You're the only one who can define that.
That's true. That's exactly right. And there are times when you feel that you can't do it all and you want to take a little bit of a step back. And I've done that too. And it's, but I think we have to help women who want to come back, get back into the workforce and become working moms again, because I think it does have a very positive impact on the next generation of as well. So anyway, thank you. We are running out of time. So Corie, I think there are 30 more questions still unanswered. So, maybe what we'll do is, send them to you and see if you have an opportunity to respond to some of them. And thank you also for this wonderful, wonderful conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
It was wonderful. And I did see the feedback on our return policy, and I will take that back to the team. I promise. I do read the questions as they come up. So we will absolutely take those back and provide some answers if that would be helpful. But mostly just thank you everyone who's out there in the dot in my computer. Hopefully there's been one or two tidbits that are helpful, but I just appreciate the time, Sri. It's been wonderful.
Well, thank you, Corie. And again, all of you who are out there, we had, I don't know, over 800 people attending this one. So please join us next month to hear from Mike Osterholm, Director of University of Minnesota Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy, and one of the top epidemiologists in this country. And that event is going to take place on Tuesday, April 6th, 2021, right here on Zoom from noon to 1 p.m. So I hope I see all of you. And for those of you who've registered for today's post-event networking, you'll have to exit this Zoom meeting and use the link in your confirmation email for that networking portion. Thank you all for being here. Hope to see you next month. And thank you again, Corie.
Thank you.